add my thanks to you being here tonight. Events in Washington, D.C., I think, are probably going to swell your ranks over the next 16 to 18 months, and I hope it will, because, in fact, you're the folks that will make a difference the next November that election comes. And if anything that we can take away from this experience in the last 5 months in the legislature is that elections have consequences. The people of Minnesota decided on one party controlling both the House and the Senate and the governor. We're here today to talk about what happened. From my standpoint, no good, bad, and I'll just say in my mind, all except for the destination medical center, it was all bad. In fact, I had put one way from a friend of mine sits in front of me. He said it's like the rock song 30 years ago, Hotel California. You can check out, but you can never leave. And by the end of the session, that's what it seemed like, either both in committee or actually working on the floor. I passed out a couple of handouts before we got started. One of them actually is a two-sided, kind of gives you a perspective of where we're at, what we've done. There's a single-sided one that's kind of like the bill. That's more or less a summary of the tax bill that you've already gotten. I don't know that it's been mentioned, but $2.1 billion in new taxes and an additional $400 to $500 million in fees that we won't get into because it will take far more than my 5 minutes. We can ask later in terms of questions. But $2.1 billion in additional new taxes, 1.1 or 2 on the new upper bracket. That bracket will make Minnesota having the 4th highest in the nation. And if you put it all together and average those numbers, we're the 3rd highest income tax in the nation. There are approximately 600 families that fall into that 4th tier in Olmsted County alone. Meaning as an individual they make $150,000 or as a family they make $250,000. And that will mean an additional or burden of 25% more, that's the increase, or 2% more on their income by the end of the year. So if the folks in St. Paul don't think that will have an impact, I've already begun to get emails, and I had to make a trip to the Capitol for a commission meeting this afternoon, and the mail's starting to pile up for people that are complaining, and they have good complaints. And then my hope is that they don't forget those as we proceed over the next 2 years, talk about it more, and people become more engaged. Just as an example, though, a contrast, I did add another handout that showed what we did as Republicans 2 years ago. We had a $5 billion budget deficit going in, left to us by 4 years of unending spending and out-of-control increases by the Democrats that we had to correct. We did that without any additional tax increases. The Democrats like to call it an all-cuts budget, when in fact, the Health and Human Services budget was added. We added $1.7 billion to that. We added $700 million to K-12. What we didn't do is continue their automatic increases. So because they weren't as great as they were plugged in, we cut from the projection. But in terms of what we actually added from the previous biennium, there was more money in that budget. Well, what happened? Our unemployment dropped from 7.5 to 5.7. We added 50,000 new jobs. And we ended the month of April this year with $150 million more in revenue that was planned. That accumulated to what we had already had through February, which was 2.8. And we can expect that revenue from taxes that we didn't increase because of the increase of the economy in the state of Minnesota alone will add an additional $3 billion to a coffers. Now, what did that do? It helped us to bend down the education shift that we were required to take with the agreement with the governor. If you remember, we had a 70-30 with the prior bills that we had with the Democratic legislature. When we finally negotiated a bill with the governor and got out of town, so to speak, after a lengthy shutdown, his doing, it was 60-40. Where are we at today? Because we've added, as Republicans, more money to the economy. We're at 86.4%. With good reason to believe that by the May and the June projections that we'll get, the actuals that we'll get, that we'll see a substantially, if not eliminated, school shift. That, of course, the Democrats harped on us about for not paying off. What wasn't covered in here is there's not a dime of new money in this tax plan to abate any shift. None at all. I know, I'm out of time already. I'm just going to add one thing. It's terrible expansion of government. To understand that 2 years ago, our goal was to begin shrinking the size of government, making it more efficient. I had bills, Carla had bills to do that, using data analytics and so on. We had a sunset commission to look at every agency and committee to see if whether it was still needed. We have committees that have been going for 80 years with no real purpose except for they have a budget and they meet. In this legislature, they eliminated the Sunset Commission. They not only eliminated the Sunset Commission, but in the stack of notes that I have here for every one of the bills, they added 1,300 new state workers. Now that's not teachers or county workers, 1,300 state workers. It'll get brought up at some point in our discussion, but in the insurance exchange, Mensure alone, 80 new employees to run a website. 80 new employees to run a website. In the final state government finance bill, all the top executives, the commissioners and the people that are called in Tier 1 and Tier 2, got as much as 50, I'm not lying, look this up, 50% raises. Okay, they were tied to the governor and they could only get 90% of what the governor made before. So he made 120, these commissioners could only make 108 and change. There was a bill that was submitted, it was passed, it's going to be signed into law, that they'll now make 133% of the governor. And oh, by the way, the governor is going to give himself a raise of 3% in 15 and 3% in 16. So if you know anything about contract negotiations, we've had a compression of all state worker wages. Well, now they've increased the top levels, so you can expect that further negotiations with all our state workers, be they in AFSCME or MAPES or any of them, are now going to be swelled because of the additional income that's made by the executives in the state government. So my time's up.